What if everything you know about ninjas is a lie? No black suits, no loyal oaths, and certainly no honor codes. The truth is far more disturbing. These silent warriors lived in shadows, but not for the reasons you think. Their secrets weren't just deadly, they were forbidden. And the most shocking of all was something historians still try to bury. Stay until the final chapter, because what you learn there might rewrite everything about ancient Japan. But before we dive in, let me know if you're enjoying this kind of long, gentle history. Feel free to tap that like button and subscribe, only if you truly love what I'm doing here. And in the comments, share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your city. I always love seeing our little bedtime crew gathering from every corner of the world. Now lower your lights, maybe let a soft fan hum in the background, and settle in. Let's ease into tonight's quiet journey together. Chapter 1: Outcasts in the Shadows. They weren't born in silk. They didn't grow up in temples or train under master swordsmen in secret mountain dojos. Most of them had no lineage, no name, no real place in society at all. The earliest ninjas came from ash and ruin. Refugees from villages burned in civil wars, orphans of executed traitors, peasants crushed under feudal taxes. When the land turned cold and the lords turned cruel, survival became their only code. They weren't admired, they were hated. Even samurai looked down on them as cowards. But that was the point. The ninja was never meant to be seen. He wasn't made to be honored. He was made to vanish. Not because he wanted to, but because the world gave him no other choice. Before the name ninja ever existed, before the myths ever caught fire, there were the forgotten. These were people who chose shadows not for glory, but because daylight would get them killed. But for all the fantasy that clouded their legacy, something real still lingers beneath the stories. The ninja wasn't born out of discipline or glory. He was born out of cruelty, a response to a world that punished the powerless and rewarded the cruel. The ninja was the weapon of the forgotten, the dirty answer to a corrupt system. He didn't exist to defend honor. He existed to survive in a world where honor had already been destroyed. And that is why his story never made it into the official scrolls. The samurai had poems written for them. The ninja had silence, because history is written by the visible. But the ninja was never meant to be seen. And that silence, that deliberate invisibility, was perhaps his most enduring legacy. No records, no gravestones, just rumors. And in those rumors, power. Because the ninja's strength didn't come from loyalty, tradition, or nobility, came from adaptation, from learning to turn fear into armor, from being hated and using that hate as fuel, from walking through a burning world and choosing to become smoke. No history book will tell you that, because history loves its heroes clean. But the ninja was never clean. He was dirt, he was shadow. He was every broken piece of a country that didn't want to see its own face. And still, somehow, he endured. They built their world beneath the one everyone else saw. While the noblemen dined behind paper walls, these outcasts crawled beneath them. They learned to move like rats, hide like ghosts, and lie like merchants. Many were once criminals. Some had escaped punishments by pretending to die. Others were survivors of shattered warrior clans, turned into mercenaries and gravediggers. In the chaos of Japan's warring states period, opportunity didn't wear armor. Crept in through smoke and fear. The ninja was born in this darkness, not as a hero, but as a necessary evil. Feudal lords wouldn't acknowledge them in public, but they would pay in gold to have one sneak through enemy lines. The same warlords who toasted their samurai in the open would curse the ninja in private, even as they sent them to poison wells and spark rebellions. No monuments were built for them, only secrets, only rumors. Villages that produced ninjas like Iga and Koga became known for secrecy and mistrust. The people there had a different way of living. They built houses with hidden floors, grew plants that revealed footprints, and trained children not in swordsmanship, but in silence. These were not elite military schools. They were places where paranoia became tradition. Every man was a spy, every woman a lookout. Even the children learned to throw dust in a soldier's eyes. The goal wasn't battle, it was escape. When the lords began raiding villages to eliminate potential threats, the people of Iga scattered and vanished into forests. What remained were rumors of phantom killers, shapeshifters, and whispering assassins. But these weren't myths, they were desperate farmers turned survivors. They forged a way of life from fear, deception, and necessity. And that life became legend. It was desperation that forced them to rewrite the rules of war. While samurai fought in open fields under banners and honor codes, ninjas struck at night with no warning. They didn't announce duels or wait for sunrise. They crawled under doors, bribed servants, and slipped poison into rice bowls. They didn't conquer, they disrupted. And in doing so, they broke every rule that defined noble warfare. Samurai viewed them as the lowest form of fighter. And they were right. But in a world of collapsing dynasties and endless war, that made them useful. Very useful. Daimyos who scorned them during peace would send for them when alliances crumbled. The ninja's value came from his invisibility, not just physical but social. He was the unmentionable blade, the sin someone else would commit. And if caught, no lord would claim him. Because the ninja didn't serve honor. He served outcome. And that made him dangerous to everyone. But even within their own world, trust was a rare currency. Ninja networks were built on silence, not brotherhood. Betrayal was not an exception. It was part of the job. There was no single ninja army, no centralized code. They were mercenaries, freelancers, sometimes even double agents. If a better offer came, loyalty evaporated. And if one failed a mission, his own allies might eliminate him before he could talk. These were not noble warriors. They were disposable tools, and they knew it. That's why they trained their minds as much as their bodies. Not to fight longer, but to disappear faster. The ninja didn't seek revenge. He avoided being a target altogether. When he killed, it was clean. When he vanished, it was total. Many never even used their real names. Some were never seen again. Not because they died, but because survival meant erasing the past completely. And the training was brutal. Not in martial arts, but in humiliation. Young recruits were made to crawl through human waste to build resistance to stench. They were forced to steal from their own neighbors without being caught. They learned to eat roots, insects, and moldy rice, because a ninja couldn't rely on supply lines. They practiced walking across gravel without a sound. And when they failed, they were beaten not to punish them, but to simulate what would happen if captured. They weren't taught to die honorably. They were taught to never get caught. In the shadows, honor was irrelevant. Survival was the only virtue. If that meant disguising oneself as a monk, a servant, or even a dead man, so be it. Identity was a costume, loyalty was an illusion, and morality was a luxury only the powerful could afford. Yet despite the scorn they received, their skills became legendary. Not because people loved them, but because they feared what they could do. A single ninja could dismantle an army, not by force, but by creating panic, confusion, or betrayal from within. Castles fell because someone opened a gate. Clans fell because someone forged a letter. Bloodlines ended because someone whispered the wrong name into the right ear. And when the deed was done, the ninja didn't stand over the body. He was already gone. This wasn't magic, it was mastery. Not of violence, but of attention. Ninjas didn't vanish into thin air. They simply knew where people weren't looking. They didn't fight battles. They ended them before they began. And they did it alone. This isolation came at a cost. Many ninjas never lived long. Those who survived often ended up broken mentally and physically, trusting no one, loved by no one. They were too dangerous to be friends, too useful to be forgotten. The lords who paid them would deny them. The people who feared them would spread stories. And so, over time, they became monsters in the public eye. Not men, but demons. Not warriors, but shadows with blades. Ironically, that suited them. The more they were feared, the less they were pursued. The more mystery surrounded them, the easier it was to operate. Their reputation became a weapon, and as it grew, they leaned into it, creating symbols, hand gestures, and fake rituals to confuse outsiders. What began as a survival strategy became a mythos. Centuries later, as peace settled over Japan, the need for ninjas faded. But the myths only grew stronger. Artists, storytellers, and eventually filmmakers took pieces of truth and stretched them into fantasy. They gave ninjas black suits, magical skills, and noble hearts. The peasants became samurai. The assassins became heroes. It was easier to believe that such skills came from secret schools and mystical training than to accept the harsh truth. That these warriors were never meant to be remembered. That they came from the margins, lived in filth, and died with no one knowing their names. The black mask wasn't a symbol of power. It was a shroud of shame. It let them operate in a world that refused to see them as human. Chapter 2: Secrets over Swords. The deadliest ninja didn't carry a sword. He carried nothing but time, patience, and 1,000 stolen whispers. While the samurai studied blade techniques, the ninja studied people. And not just generals and warlords. He studied servants, midwives, tavern owners, lovers. He knew that war was never really won on the battlefield. It was won in bedrooms, kitchens, and alleys. He didn't just move in shadows. He listened in them. One rumor, if placed in the right ear, could cause a war. One forged document could topple an entire clan. That was his weapon, information. Not brute force, not flashy combat, but careful observation, relentless patience, and a memory sharpened like a blade. Sometimes the ninja didn't even have to leave a mark. Just deliver a letter, or light a signal fire, or leave a corpse in the wrong place at the right time. His true skill wasn't to kill. It was to unravel an entire system and never get caught. But espionage came with a price. The ninja could never grow attached. Friends could betray you. A familiar voice could be a trap. Even allies might sell you out if the reward was high enough. That's why the best ninja operatives train themselves to trust no one. They used false names, burned their old identities, and sometimes even pretended to be mute to avoid saying too much. Some families never knew their son had become a ninja. Some ninja didn't even know their real family anymore. Their true weapon wasn't poison or smoke bombs. It was detachment, a clean mind, no doubts, no grief, just the mission. The only thing they believed in was the next move. In the end, it wasn't the blade that made the ninja powerful. It was the ability to influence events without ever stepping onto the battlefield, to win wars with whispers, to manipulate enemies into destroying themselves. The samurai wielded swords in daylight. The ninja wielded shadows and shaped entire histories without ever being seen. What made them dangerous wasn't how they killed. It was how they vanished, leaving behind nothing but chaos, doubt, and the lingering fear that someone, somewhere, still knew your secrets. No history book will tell you how many wars ended before they began, because of a ninja who never drew a blade. Espionage wasn't a bonus skill for the ninja. It was the core of his profession. He trained for years not to fight, but to become invisible in plain sight. He learned how to mimic accents from different provinces, how to read emotions by watching eyelids, how to spot a lie by observing a servant's pause at a doorframe. A well-trained ninja didn't just sneak into a room. He could blend into it. Disguise was more than a change of clothes. It was a transformation of identity. He could become a monk by sunrise, a stable boy by noon, and a traveling merchant by nightfall. While samurai wore the same crest and armor into every battle, the ninja's armor was adaptability. He changed faster than others could track. And when he was gone, the people who saw him wouldn't remember his face, just a feeling. A chill, a flicker, a doubt that maybe, just maybe, someone had been watching all along.
One of the ninja's most effective hunting grounds wasn't a battlefield. It was a brothel. These places weren't just for pleasure. They were information hubs. Lords drank and bragged. Courtiers let secrets slip between sake and sighs. Servants passed messages. Mistresses whispered confessions. In these houses of illusion, the ninja didn't need a weapon. He only needed ears. He could pose as a musician, a cleaner, even a shy client. Sometimes he brought nothing but a smile and an empty purse. But he always left with something, a name, a time, a coded message overheard between laughs. If he was lucky, he'd learn about a secret passage in a rival's castle. If he was patient, he might hear of a betrayal still being planned. And sometimes he wouldn't report it at all. He would wait, use the knowledge himself. Because the greatest asset a ninja had wasn't his loyalty. It was what he knew, and what others didn't.
Letters became weapons in his hands. But they weren't always written truthfully. In fact, the most effective letters were complete lies, dressed in familiar handwriting and sealed with forged crests. A single document suggesting that a lord was planning to betray his allies could ignite bloodshed before a single sword was drawn. Ninja operatives would carefully study family seals, mimic pen strokes, and even steal the paper used in a rival's palace to make their forgeries perfect. They would plant these letters in the right saddlebag, the right sleeve, or the right messenger's pouch. Once discovered, the chaos would spread on its own. Armies would mobilize based on rumors. Alliances would dissolve. Castles would fall without a single assault. And in the background, the ninja who started it all would already be gone, leaving nothing behind but a lie that grew more real with every passing hour. Not every infiltration ended in blood. Sometimes, success meant leaving everything exactly as it was, except for one small detail. A map that no longer matched the terrain. A servant who had vanished without notice. A watchtower light that failed to shine at the expected hour. These weren't accidents. They were messages written in silence, each one carefully placed to suggest that something was wrong, without ever proving it. Paranoia did the rest. If a warlord began to suspect spies in his own ranks, he might execute his most loyal men. If a general feared assassination, he might change routes and delay attacks, handing the enemy time to regroup. The ninja didn't need to fight. He only needed to nudge. And once he did, fear would do the rest. In a land where face and reputation were everything, doubt became deadlier than steel. The ninja's ear was trained like a weapon. In crowded markets, he could hear a name whispered under a breath. In shrines, he could decipher coded prayers. Even the inflection in a servant's voice could reveal resentment, which could reveal motive, which could reveal opportunity. He memorized family trees, tax records, and even food preferences because any of it could be useful in breaking a man's will. He understood that knowledge wasn't just power, it was leverage. If a nobleman's son was seen in a forbidden temple, the ninja stored it. If a maid was stealing food from the kitchen, he remembered. These details didn't just fill scrolls. They shaped entire strategies. Because when the time came to extract a confession or force a defection, he didn't need to raise a weapon. He only needed to reveal what he already knew and watch his target crumble. There were no safe places when a ninja was nearby. Not behind castle walls, not inside inner chambers, not even in one's own mind. The ninja could disguise himself as a temple bell ringer, a blind beggar, or a half-mad pilgrim. Once inside the enemy's stronghold, he didn't rush. He waited days, weeks, sometimes longer, watching, listening, mapping every hallway, counting footsteps during guard rotations, learning which doors creaked and which ones didn't. When he struck, it was never random. He knew the weakest servant, the drunkest guard, the most arrogant advisor. The ninja's gift wasn't speed. It was stillness. His blade didn't flash. It whispered, and his exits were so quiet that sometimes hours passed before anyone realized something or someone was missing. Not all ninja spies were trained fighters. Many were informants living double lives. Peasants who pretended to be simple farmers but who carried encoded messages stitched into their robes. Performers who dazzled crowds while mapping enemy compounds from memory. Even children were used, trained to deliver seemingly innocent gifts that concealed deadly information. These civilian agents never held swords, but they were no less vital. They filled in the gaps between missions, fed intelligence up the chain, and sometimes vanished without explanation. If captured, their stories died with them. But if successful, they changed the course of battles with a single word delivered at the right time. For the ninja network to thrive, it needed more than assassins. It needed silence, trust, and thousands of ordinary faces hiding extraordinary secrets. A successful ninja operation often left no bodies, no blood, no open battlefields. But it left scars on families, on alliances, on history itself. Entire clans were erased because one ninja delivered the wrong name at the right time. And these weren't lone wolves. Ninja operated in tightly coordinated units, even if they moved separately. One agent might create a distraction in a nearby village, drawing away scouts. Another might plant false intelligence suggesting an ambush. A third would slip into the castle unnoticed. And by morning, a key general would be gone. A gate would be unlocked, and 100 soldiers would storm a fortress that never saw it coming. The ninja's real art was coordination in shadows. Multiple moving parts, all invisible, all precise. And when it worked, it looked like fate itself had turned against their enemies. Chapter 3: Gangs in Disguise. Forget the image of a noble ninja clan training in serene mountain temples under ancient family banners. That's not what they were. Real ninja groups looked far more like organized criminal networks, loyal only to profit and survival. These weren't brotherhoods bound by honor. They were shadow syndicates run like black market cartels. They operated from the backrooms of taverns, behind crumbling walls, and beneath quiet villages. Their services were for sale. Loyalty was leased, and if a better offer came from the enemy, they would switch sides without hesitation. Even their supposed clans were often just loose affiliations, temporary alliances forged by money, fear, and necessity. These weren't secret orders of warriors guarding ancient codes. They were spies, thieves, poisoners, and saboteurs, networked together not by trust, but by leverage. And when it came time to choose between their employers and their own survival, they didn't hesitate. In the underworld of feudal Japan, ninja were just another kind of gang, only much harder to trace. Alliances with samurai were rare and fragile. Ninja operatives sometimes worked with lower-ranked samurai who felt overlooked or underpaid. They traded secrets for coin, but these partnerships were risky. Samurai codes clashed with ninja pragmatism. A ninja saw an opportunity where a samurai saw dishonor. Sooner or later, resentment brewed. One wrong move, and the samurai might kill the ninja just to preserve his reputation. That's why most ninja preferred to deal with merchants, monks, and disgruntled vassals. People already used to bending the rules. It wasn't about trust. It was about who could be bought, manipulated, or frightened. Samurai could be dangerous allies, but merchants understood cost. Monks understood silence, and peasants understood fear. In this murky world, everyone had a price, and those who didn't were usually dead. In the end, what held these networks together wasn't ideology. It was mutual interest. Every member knew that survival depended on discretion. Everyone had something to lose. That's what made the whole thing work. Not loyalty, not honor, just pressure. Everyone was watched. Everyone was useful. And if they weren't, they were removed. The ninja were not mystical warriors. They were mercenary networks, built like cartels, run like intelligence agencies, and feared like crime families. And while samurai lords came and went, these shadow organizations endured. Because they didn't fight for banners. They fought for information, profit, control, and they did it better than anyone. They had bosses, enforcers, messengers, and inside men, just like any crime syndicate. A lord might think he was hiring a lone ninja to sabotage a rival castle, but in reality he was hiring into a web. That operative was part of a tightly coordinated network, where favors were tracked, debts were called in, and punishment came swift for anyone who broke the chain. Ninja leaders weren't mystical elders in robes. They were power brokers. They didn't recite ancient codes of honor. They negotiated terms, set prices, traded secrets like currency. If one group had access to a palace servant in Kyoto, and another had an informant in a rival clan stable. They'd form a deal temporarily. Sometimes these arrangements worked. Other times they ended in betrayal, because in this world, betrayal wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Whoever controlled the most information, whoever struck first, lived. Everyone else became collateral. And the game never stopped, even when peace was declared. Some ninja networks were so complex, not even their own members knew the full structure. Compartmentalization was key. One agent might only know a single contact, a single drop location, a single set of codes. That way, if captured, they couldn't reveal the whole operation. These were spy cells, not warrior bands. Even their training reflected this. New recruits weren't taught everything. They were taught only what they needed to complete one job.
Surveillance, forgerie, smuggling.
Each skill had a specialist. If you needed someone to slip poison into a sake barrel, you didn't hire a sword expert. You hired the poisoner. If you needed to bribe a gate guard, you hired the talker. And if one of them failed, the network closed ranks. Sometimes they erased the failed agent before the enemy could interrogate them. Silence was enforced with fear, not discipline, not loyalty, just the constant knowledge that one wrong step could turn your allies into your executioners. There were territories, too, unofficial zones where one ninja group operated and others didn't intrude without permission. If a rival group did step in, turf wars erupted. Not with open warfare, but with backroom killings, disappearances, and disinformation. It wasn't about honor. It was about income, power, control. The most skilled ninja families in IGA and Koga often competed for the same high-paying clients. Daimyos desperate to sabotage rivals or spy on allies. Sometimes a lord would play both sides, hiring two ninja groups for the same mission, just to see who completed it first. And sometimes neither would succeed because one group would sabotage the other before the job even started. In this way, ninja society resembled a deadly black market economy more than a loyal warrior brotherhood. They weren't bound by shared blood or ancient tradition. They were bound by contracts, leverage, and paranoia. And if you couldn't play by those rules, you didn't last long. Blackmail was a powerful tool. Ninja groups often maintained secret records, lists of affairs, bribes, murders, and family scandals, used to control those both inside and outside their circles. If a wealthy merchant refused to pay for past services, his wife's affair might suddenly become public. If a castle servant tried to switch allegiances, his forged birth papers might find their way into the hands of a samurai inspector. Even ninja operatives weren't safe. If one tried to leave the trade, the network might threaten their family, expose their past, or spread false rumors to turn potential allies into enemies. This web of silence wasn't maintained by loyalty. It was maintained by fear. Each secret was a leash. Each mission a test. Trust was not extended. It was bought, monitored, and revoked at the first sign of weakness. Betrayal didn't just come from enemies. It came from the shadows closest to you. And that was how the system survived. They didn't just trade in information. They traded in people. Ninja groups often kidnapped enemy informants, turned them with promises or threats, and inserted them back into rival networks as double agents. They recruited children, trained them to obey without question, and sent them into castles as disguised errand boys or stable hands. Sometimes they took prisoners of war, not to ransom but to convert into spies. Those who resisted were discarded. Those who cooperated were given new identities and new roles. This wasn't honor, it was logistics. Every tool was used. Every person was expendable. Sometimes they even sold out their own clients. If a lord paid them to infiltrate a rival's estate, they might accept a counteroffer from that rival to deliver false intel instead. Money always talked louder than loyalty, and when both sides realized they'd been manipulated, it was too late. The ninja had already disappeared with double the payment and none of the blame. Like crime bosses, powerful ninja heads kept their faces hidden. They rarely appeared in public. They sent trusted lieutenants to deliver orders. If you angered one, you might never know it, until your guards disappeared, your food tasted strange, or your own advisors started turning against you. These leaders rarely led missions themselves. Their power came from connections, not combat. They controlled supply routes, black markets, and strings of informants that stretched across entire provinces. Even samurai lords respected them, silently, of course, because these leaders didn't just offer services. They offered insurance. They could protect a secret or destroy a legacy. Their favor could tilt a war. Their wrath could erase a name from history. And all of it happened behind closed doors, under the cover of night, with no witnesses and no records. Just whispers and consequences. Even the idea of a clan was often an illusion. Some groups claimed lineage or family honor, but most were just temporary alliances dressed up in ritual. They used family symbols not because of tradition, but because it gave them cover. It made them look respectable. It made the myth stronger. But behind those masks, many were hired thugs with clever minds and short tempers. The rituals were rehearsed. The hand signs exaggerated. It was all for show. Smoke and mirrors to impress clients and terrify enemies. The real engine was profit, power, leverage. And when the illusion wore off, when a mission failed or a rival offered a better deal, those so-called clans splintered without hesitation. They didn't fight to the death. They vanished, regrouped, and reemerged under new names. Because in the shadows, survival was more important than loyalty. Reputation could be rebuilt. Money could buy silence. And no name lasted forever, not even the deadliest. Corruption ran deep. Some ninja groups paid bribes to samurai inspectors to avoid scrutiny. Others blackmailed local officials into protecting their agents. In some cases, entire towns operated under ninja control. Every gatekeeper, merchant, and shrine attendant feeding information up the chain. To outsiders, these places looked ordinary, but inside, every movement was watched, every stranger noted, and every whisper carried weight. If a target entered such a town, they wouldn't realize they were already surrounded. The butcher might be an assassin, the innkeeper a handler. Even the children might be trained to follow without being seen. This kind of total control wasn't built on swords. It was built on fear, blackmail, and meticulous planning. And it didn't require armies. Just enough leverage in the right places. Just enough fear to keep people quiet. And just enough reward to make betrayal profitable. These were towns run like criminal empires. Quiet, efficient, and ruthless beneath the surface. Chapter 4. Fake weapons, real fear. The black suit, the throwing star. The smoke bomb vanishing act. These aren't relics of ninja history. They're inventions, some from theater, others from comic books. The truth is much messier. Real ninjas didn't walk around carrying flashy gadgets. They used what they could scavenge steel, or disguise. Their tools weren't forged by master craftsmen. They were forged by necessity. If a hoe looked like a spear, it became one. If a kitchen knife could be concealed inside a rice ball, it became a blade. The tools of the ninja weren't sacred. They were disposable. The goal wasn't to carry perfect weapons. It was to carry nothing that would reveal their identity if caught. Most ninja tools weren't designed to fight. They were meant to confuse, distract, and disorient. And when those didn't work, the ninja relied on something far more dangerous than steel: panic. Not in themselves, but in their enemies. Because a frightened guard made mistakes. And mistakes gave the ninja his opening. Ironically, the ninja myth survived because of these lies. People wanted to believe in magical weapons and flawless escapes. They wanted legends, not labor. But real ninja lived in filth. They carried tools sewn into rotten garments. They buried their weapons when necessary and lied about what they carried if captured. Many died with their tricks still hidden. And even now, archaeologists struggle to find authentic ninja gear. Because it wasn't meant to last. It wasn't designed to be remembered. It was meant to work once, then disappear, like the ninja themselves. That's why the museums today display replicas, interpretations of tools based on scrolls, rumors, and theater scripts. The actual tools gone, burned, buried, forgotten on purpose. Because the ninja's craft was secrecy, and every tool they used was part of a larger trick. Not to impress, but to survive. What truly made a ninja terrifying wasn't what he carried. It was what people thought he carried. The idea of hidden blades, poison needles, vanishing clouds. It worked because it couldn't be disproven. No one knew what a ninja might pull from his robes. That uncertainty kept enemies awake at night. The myths became a weapon in themselves. And the ninja, ever the opportunist, leaned into it. If people feared the shuriken, he carried a few. If they believed in vanishing, he slipped away through clever exits. Fear was a force multiplier. It did more than steel ever could. It froze minds, slowed hands, broke formations. And the ninja knew that better than anyone, because he didn't need to strike. He only needed the threat to feel real. And once that fear took hold, the enemy was already defeated. Forget metal stars flying through the air like bullets. Real shuriken were backup tools, crude, unreliable, often used more to cut purses or injure feet than to kill enemies. They were carried in small numbers, often hidden inside sleeves or woven into cloth. Throwing them wasn't precise. It was desperate, a distraction, a warning, an escape tactic. If it lodged in flesh, good. If it missed, it didn't matter. The goal wasn't death. It was confusion, surprise, a half second of hesitation. Because in that sliver of time, the ninja could escape, or strike, or vanish into a crowd. These weren't movie props. They were jagged bits of metal, sometimes forged from coins, scrap tools, or broken farming blades. Lightweight, easy to conceal, and never traced back. In fact, many ninja intentionally made their tools look like junk. Because if captured, they could always say it was an accident or a toy. The real weapon wasn't the tool. It was the lie that followed it. The iconic smoke bomb is even more misleading. There's no historical proof that ninjas carried pre-made smoke grenades. What they did carry were improvised chemical powders, often sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter, and sometimes pepper or ash, stored in pouches or hollowed gourds. These weren't used for combat. They were used to create confusion during escapes. But even then, they weren't magic. Lighting one in a small room could choke everyone, including the ninja. Outdoors, they were nearly useless in the wind. The real effectiveness came not from the smoke itself, but from what people believed was in it. Enemies assumed poison or fire or worse. The fear of what was inside gave the ninja a moment's advantage, and that's all he needed. Sometimes he didn't even use smoke. Just a sudden noise, a fake collapse, or a cleverly timed shout in the distance. The idea was to shift attention, not cause destruction. If the enemy turned their head for a second, the ninja was already gone. Most ninja didn't carry swords. And when they did, the swords weren't elegant masterpieces. They were short, cheap, and easily replaceable. The straight-bladed ninjutsu often shown in films? A complete fabrication. Historically, ninjas sometimes used shortened katanas or simple machete-like blades that could be hidden beneath robes. Some didn't carry blades at all. Just knives tucked into sandals or cords tied with sharpened rocks. A sword wasn't just heavy, it was a liability. If stopped by samurai patrols, a commoner with a sword risked death. That's why many ninjas preferred tools that could be explained away. A farmer's sickle, a carpenter's chisel, a walking stick with a weighted handle. All of these could kill. None of them raised suspicion. If they needed a real weapon, they'd steal one from the enemy. The fewer items they carried, the less they had to explain. And the less noise they made when they moved through enemy territory in the middle of the night. Disguise tools were everywhere. A simple flute could hold poison needles. A lantern could hide a razor. Even ink brushes could be laced with toxins or hollowed to smuggle messages. One of the most overlooked ninja weapons was the grappling hook, but it wasn't always made of metal. Sometimes it was a tangle of rope and wooden prongs. Easy to climb with, easy to burn after use. Many ninja tools weren't durable by design. They were single-use, then discarded. And the most creative tools weren't for attack, they were for infiltration. A ladder that folded into a scroll case. A reed that doubled as a breathing tube. Ash rubbed into the soles to erase footprints. These weren't props. They were survival gear, built for speed, not strength. The goal wasn't to dominate the enemy. It was to slip in, do the job, and leave without a trace. That's why the best ninja tool was always the one no one noticed. Some ninja carried decoys, dead birds stuffed with messages, severed limbs laced with false clues, even fake corpses smeared in pig blood. These weren't signs of cruelty. They were tricks to mislead enemy scouts. If a patrol found a mutilated body with foreign markings, they'd assume an ambush, halt their advance, or send reinforcements in the wrong direction. Sometimes the body wasn't even human. Could be a mannequin stuffed with straw and soaked in blood. From a distance, it fooled everyone. And in the chaos, the ninja moved silently toward the real target. These grotesque decoys were psychological weapons. They planted fear, confusion, hesitation. They made the enemy believe they were being hunted, or watched or cursed, and that fear did more damage than any blade. The ninja's deadliest tools weren't built to kill. They were built to create questions, suspicion, doubt. And once a soldier doubted what he was seeing, he was no longer a threat. Poison was one of the most feared tools in the ninja arsenal, but even this was often improvised. There were no perfect poisons, just concoctions made from roots, berries, insects, and mold. Most weren't lethal, they caused sickness, delirium, paralysis. Sometimes just enough to ruin a meal or slow a guard. In rare cases, a full dose might kill. But dosage was tricky, delivery risky. A bitter aftertaste could ruin the plan. That's why poisons were usually delivered in subtle ways. On paper scrolls, lacquered bowls, or through infected needles hidden in clothing. Some ninja didn't use real poison at all, just substances that caused vomiting or hallucinations, convincing the victim they had been cursed or targeted. The illusion of poisoning was sometimes more effective than actual poisoning, created panic, chaos, and it left no physical proof. For the ninja, fear always traveled faster than death. And sometimes, all they needed was a rumor of poison to make an entire fortress go silent. Even armor was a myth. Ninjas didn't wear reinforced leather or plated suits. Armor was loud, heavy, slowed them down. The real uniform of a ninja was anonymity. A farmer's robe, a merchant's coat, a monk's simple tunic, sometimes even a woman's kimono. If they wore black, it wasn't tight spandex. It was loose-fitting cloth meant to blend in with night shadows or temple servants. And even that was rare. Most ninja dressed to match their surroundings. In a city, they looked like beggars. In a forest, like hunters. In a castle, like cooks or guards. The best disguise was the one no one questioned. Not dramatic, just invisible. Their greatest camouflage wasn't fabric. It was familiarity. When no one notices you, you can go anywhere. Through gates, past guards. Into chambers where whispers die and secrets wait. And when you leave, no one remembers you were ever there. That was the real armor of the ninja. Silence, simplicity, disappearance. One of the most misunderstood ninja devices was the Mizugumo, supposedly a set of wooden shoes that let ninjas walk on water. In reality, it was a clunky flotation aid, almost useless in real infiltration. Like many ninja gadgets, it existed more in myth than in practice. Many such tools were exaggerated later by storytellers or forged entirely by stage performers. In the Edo period, ninja theater became popular. Actors portrayed ninja with dramatic effects, flash powder, hidden trapdoors, impossible escapes. Audiences loved it, the myths grew. By the 20th century, comic books and movies picked up the fantasy. Suddenly, the ninja became a superhero, invincible, invisible, unstoppable. But the truth was far more human. Their tools weren't magical. They were clumsy, incomplete, made under pressure, and used in desperation. The real skill wasn't in the gadget. It was in the hands that wielded it, and in the mind that knew exactly when to use it or not. Chapter 5. Deadlier in disguise. She didn't wear a mask. She didn't sneak through shadows. She walked through the front door smiling. While men in black leapt rooftops, she sipped tea inside the target's house. She was the kunoichi, the female ninja. Not a sidekick, not an accessory, but a lethal agent trained to manipulate, seduce, poison, and vanish without ever raising a blade. While her male counterparts relied on escape routes and crude tools, she relied on charm, patience, and proximity. No guard questioned her presence. No lord suspected her intentions. And that was her greatest weapon, being underestimated. In a society that treated women as background noise, she became invisible. Not because she couldn't be seen, but because no one thought to look closer. That's why her missions succeeded where others failed. because she was always where no one thought a ninja could be, inside the room, smiling, listening, waiting. And when the time came to act, her touch was quiet, precise, untraceable. What made the kunoichi so dangerous wasn't just their skill. It was their invisibility. Male ninjas were hunted, recognized, tracked, but the kunoichi could walk straight into the heart of a fortress and be ignored. That made her more than lethal. It made her untouchable. She wasn't bound by the same expectations. She didn't need to hide in shadows because society already overlooked her. And in that oversight, she thrived. Every rule that oppressed women became a weapon in her hands. Every door closed to men became an open path. She didn't sneak into the room. She was already seated at the table, listening, smiling, and waiting for the perfect moment to end everything. So while history remembers the silent blades and smoke bombs, the truth is this: the deadliest ninja was often the one in plain sight. She didn't need to leap across rooftops or strike from the shadows. She just needed to be seen and not noticed, because by the time you realized what she was, it was already over. The poison was poured, the message stolen, the alliance broken, and she was gone. Just another servant, another face in the crowd, another story no one believed until it was too late. The training was brutal and it started young. Kunoichi were often recruited from abandoned girls, orphans, or daughters of disgraced families. Their survival depended on obedience, observation, and silence. They learned more than martial arts. They learned how to read rooms, mimic behaviors, mirror emotions, and become whoever they needed to be. One day a servant, the next a courtesan, a merchant's daughter, a grieving widow, a holy woman. No role was off limits. The key was to slip into the scene without friction, to become the thing that would never be questioned. They were not just assassins. They were actors, spies, human traps baited with every weakness their enemies possessed. Men fell for them. Women trusted them. Servants obeyed them. Guards ignored them. And in that silence, they gathered secrets, measured poisons, timed exits. Their missions weren't about bloodshed. They were about control. And they were taught that if the target saw them coming, they had already failed. In brothels and tea houses, kunoichi thrived. These places were dens of power, where samurai lowered their guard and whispered without filters. Courtesans were often dismissed as decoration, but they heard everything. And the best among them weren't there by accident. They were planted, trained, prepared. They knew which cups to fill, which pillows to fluff, and when to linger just long enough for a dagger to slip between ribs, or for a secret to slide from drunken lips. Sometimes they never touched a weapon, just words. One wrong phrase passed to the right ear could collapse an alliance or trigger a betrayal. In those moments, the kunoichi didn't need to fight. She needed to suggest, to manipulate, to guide someone into destroying themselves. And when her job was done, she didn't run. She smiled, bowed, disappeared into the street, and no one ever realized what had just happened. The kill was silent, the weapon forgotten, the damage permanent. But not all kunoichi played the soft role. Some were trained for brute action, masters of silent movement and sudden death. These women carried poison-tipped needles in their hairpins, wires sewn into their sleeves, and small knives hidden inside their sandals. Their clothing was loose, unthreatening, but beneath it was a deadly kit. They could crush windpipes with silk cords, cut throats in crowded streets, and vanish before the body even hit the floor. Their targets were high risk: generals, advisors, informants too dangerous to leave alive. When brute force was too loud and subtlety too slow, these kunoichi delivered the finishing blow. Fast, final, forgotten. Sometimes they posed as maids to get close. Other times they used distractions: a crying child, a spilled drink, a flash of leg in the corner of a hallway. And when the moment came, they didn't hesitate, because hesitation was death. Their mission wasn't to duel. It was to finish, quietly, completely, without witnesses. Not even other ninjas knew who all the kunoichi were. Their identities were often protected, names erased, faces hidden even from their own networks. Because they weren't just operatives. They were insurance. If a male agent was caught, the kunoichi might be sent in to retrieve him or to silence him. Their presence within the network created paranoia. Everyone was vulnerable. Everyone watched their backs. And that fear kept people loyal. These women didn't just manipulate outsiders. They were used internally to keep order, to extract confessions, to deliver untraceable punishments. They were shadows within shadows, whispers wrapped in silk, and they reminded everyone that danger didn't always come with footsteps. Sometimes it came with perfume, and laughter, and a smile that lingered just a second too long. In a world ruled by fear, the kunoichi were the blade no one saw, and the punishment no one could prove. Some kunoichi specialized in long-term infiltration. Months spent inside noble households. Years living among rivals. They became concubines, nannies, midwives, sometimes even wives. Their presence was slow poison, working its way through a family line until it unraveled from within. They influenced heirs, gathered correspondence, shifted loyalties one gesture at a time. These were the deep cover agents, and their sacrifice was enormous. They gave up their names, their homes, sometimes even their identities. They risked pregnancy, exposure, and execution. But they endured because they knew the reward wasn't just payment, it was power. They could sway decisions that shaped provinces. They could ruin bloodlines without drawing a blade. And they could vanish at a moment's notice, leaving behind only questions. Why did the heir suddenly disappear? Why did the wife go mad? Why did the steward betray his master? No answers, just ruins. And in those ruins, the kunoichi's mission was complete. There were rituals, of course, not real ones, but staged ones. Initiations meant to bind kunoichi through fear, loyalty, and secrecy. Some were told they carried deadly spells in their blood. Others believed they had been cursed to die if they betrayed the network. These weren't spiritual truths. They were psychological traps, tools of control. The kunoichi lived constantly under threat, from enemies, from employers, from their own allies. Their lives were a dance on the edge of suspicion, but they didn't flinch. They turned those threats into armor. Their vulnerability became a disguise, their danger unseen. They trained to suppress fear, to show warmth when plotting death, to smile even while poisoned. Emotion was a tool, not a weakness, and when the mission called for tears, they wept with precision. When it called for affection, they delivered it like poison, and when it called for death, they didn't hesitate, because they knew they weren't just tools, they were legends. Despite their power, history almost erased them. Male chroniclers minimized their roles, calling them spies or courtesans, never warriors. Their names were rarely written, their missions uncredited, but the damage they caused was undeniable. Castles fell without sieges. Alliances broke without battles. Men turned on each other for reasons they didn't understand. And behind those collapses, you could often trace a trail, not of blood, but of silence, of vanished women, of smiling servants who were never seen again. The Kunoichi didn't leave scars. They left gaps, holes in memory, questions without answers. That was the brilliance of their design. They weren't meant to be remembered. They were meant to be effective. And in that forgotten silence, their power still echoes. Because even now, history cannot explain how some of its darkest twists came to be. It only knows they happened. Quietly, suddenly, completely. Not all Kunoichi survived. Many were caught, tortured, executed without trial. Their beauty became a curse, their skills a death sentence. But even in death, their legacy endured, because they had changed the game. They had proven that strength wasn't always physical, that power didn't need armor or a sword. It needed access, intent, precision, and the will to do what others feared. The Kunoichi blurred every line, between victim and assassin, servant and spy, woman and weapon. And in doing so, they rewrote the rules of warfare, not through violence, but through presence. Their bodies were the disguise, their smiles the distraction, their minds the real blade, and no one ever saw them coming. Chapter 6: Shadows of Superstition. Before a blade was drawn or a foot stepped in enemy territory, the ninja had already waged another war. One fought inside the mind, not with weapons, but with whispers, with symbols, with fear. They didn't just slip past guards, they infected imaginations. In a world where people believed in curses, spirits, and demons, ninjas turned superstition into their sharpest tool. A crow's cry at midnight, a strange footprint on a shrine, a dying man foaming at the mouth after seeing a shadow. These were no accidents. They were messages, carefully planted signs. Because when fear took root, people started seeing things that weren't there. They jumped at wind, fled from sounds, accused their own. And that chaos made infiltration easy. The ninja didn't have to fight his way in. He let fear open the doors. Fear of the unknown, fear of death, and above all, fear of the unnatural. Because nothing shatters discipline faster than the belief that you're cursed. Superstition offered a powerful escape hatch. When a mission failed, the ninja might leave a staged curse behind. A token, a blood-written scroll, something to confuse the enemy, to make them wonder, was this failure natural? Or something darker? It bought time. It muddied the truth. It spread paranoia. And often it covered the ninja's tracks more effectively than running ever could. In some cases, they would even plant false leads suggesting the work of demons or rival clans. This misdirection turned suspicion away from their network, and it reinforced the legend. The ninja didn't just kill. They didn't just spy. They haunted. Their name became a curse in itself, whispered in fear, censored in documents, avoided in temples, because no one wanted to invite that shadow into their home. And that was the ninja's final trick. They didn't have to be present. They only had to be imagined. The fear did the rest. So when we picture the ninja leaping across rooftops and throwing stars in moonlight, we miss something more chilling. The ninja who whispered a curse into a dream, who left a symbol in blood on a door, who convinced a general he was doomed and watched him collapse under the weight of his own imagination. These weren't warriors of the flesh. They were engineers of fear, architects of belief, and in many ways they were more dangerous than any sword-wielding assassin, because they didn't have to be right. They just had to be believed. And once you believe, once you let that seed take root, the ninja has already won. To wield fear, the ninja had to understand belief. Not just his enemies, but his own men's. Ninja leaders used rituals, chants, and symbols, not because they were real, but because they worked. They instilled obedience, loyalty, dread. Young recruits were told they carried demon blood, or that they'd die painfully if they ever betrayed their masters. The rituals felt ancient, sacred, but most were invented. Scripts scribbled by leaders who knew the power of ceremony. Initiates might be forced to fast, swallow strange powders, or witness staged visions in torchlit caves. These weren't spiritual practices. They were psychological conditioning. If a ninja believed he was bound by dark forces, he was less likely to defect, less likely to question orders, and more likely to give his life without hesitation. It wasn't the gods that commanded him, it was theater. But in that theater, loyalty was built, or fear, or both. Either way, it kept the ninja in line. Against enemies, superstition was a weapon. Castles were sometimes cursed with marks scrawled in blood, their gates covered in strange symbols. Villagers whispered of evil spirits haunting their fields after a ninja's visit. Even bodies were manipulated, positioned to mimic rituals, eyes gouged to appear possessed, mouths sewn shut with hair. These weren't just for shock. They were carefully crafted messages meant to confuse investigators, terrify survivors, and stop pursuit. Some ninja would even pretend to be possessed themselves, convulsing, chanting, claiming to see visions. This wasn't madness, it was strategy. A raving man is unpredictable, untouchable, and sometimes believed. If the enemy thought he was facing more than flesh and blood, if they believed the ninja was something beyond human, they hesitated. They waited, they made mistakes. And in those mistakes, the ninja completed his mission. Because he knew he didn't have to be real to win. He only had to be feared. There are stories of ninja leaving black cats nailed to doors, of screams in the night that came from nowhere, of sick children suddenly recovering after a ninja vanished. Every one of these tales had a purpose. Some were false, planted by ninja themselves. Others spread on their own like wildfire. The ninja didn't need to do all the work. The village gossip did it for him. Once a story caught hold, it grew, twisted, and soon the ninja's name was spoken in fear, not because of what he'd done, but because of what people thought he could do. That belief became armor. It kept guards up at night, made lords paranoid, and gave every rustling curtain the weight of death. The ninja used this fog of fear like a second skin. He didn't just hide in shadows. He made people believe the shadows were alive. And in doing so, he walked through walls no weapon could ever break. Even the landscape became part of the deception. Forests were rigged with simple traps, noisemakers that sounded like cries, wind chimes that hummed ominously, scarecrows dressed in robes resembling monks or spirits. These weren't defenses, they were illusions. A patrol deep in the woods hears a baby's cry, then silence. Then the faint scent of incense. Was it a trap? Curse? A warning? The ninja had already slipped past, but their minds were still caught in the maze he'd built. Sometimes, fires were lit on mountaintops to mimic signal beacons. Other times, dead animals were left in ritualistic poses beside wells or temples. All of it designed to warp perception, to make people believe they were being hunted by something more than human. That uncertainty was poison. It crept into dreams, weakened resolve, and made resistance fragile. Because when the mind breaks, the body soon follows. And the ninja knew exactly where to apply the pressure. Even among samurai, fear of the supernatural was strong. Many believed in spirits, curses, and ancient vengeful beings. The ninja exploited this. They sometimes disguised themselves as ghosts, wearing white robes, moving in jerky, unnatural patterns, even using powders to make their skin glow in the dark. Witnesses swore they saw spirits floating through courtyards, walking on water, passing through walls. It wasn't magic, it was timing, misdirection, and performance. A ninja might move from shadow to shadow, mimicking a supernatural pace. If caught, he'd convulse, foam at the mouth, or speak in ancient tongues. All of it rehearsed. If a guard believed he'd seen a ghost, he wouldn't report it. He'd pray. He'd keep it secret. He'd bury it in fear. And that silence protected the ninja better than any escape route. It wasn't just about being unseen, it was about making sure that even if seen, no one would dare speak of it. The perfect cover. Some ninja weren't afraid to fake divine punishment. If a lord refused a bribe or betrayed an agreement, strange events would follow. Crops would wither overnight. Servants would disappear. Sacred statues would be found desecrated. It was all orchestrated, but the message was clear: you are cursed. Many lords, terrified of attracting real misfortune, would cave to demands. They'd reverse orders, pay what was owed, or disappear quietly. The ninja knew human psychology better than any priest. People feared shame, isolation, the wrath of unseen gods. So ninja gave them just enough evidence to spiral. Sometimes it didn't take much. A nail in a shoe, a shadow cast where it shouldn't be, a servant whispering the wrong thing at the wrong time. And suddenly, a man of power unraveled. He believed the curse was real. And once he did, the ninja had already won. Because belief moves faster than reason, and fear carves deeper than any blade. The irony is that many ninja didn't believe in these superstitions themselves, but they studied them like science. They knew which symbols evoked terror, which stories stuck, which gestures made people flinch. They weren't priests. They were manipulators of belief. Some studied local religions. Others collected folk tales. All of them learned how to weaponize fear. A peasant might scream at a cursed doll. A samurai might tremble at a ghostly whisper. Different tools for different targets, but always the same result: control. Because fear creates predictability. A frightened person hesitates. A frightened leader overreacts. And the ninja, always watching, used that hesitation like an opening. They slipped in, set the stage. And when the panic came, they were already gone. Like a dream, like a spirit, like a curse that leaves no trace, but changes everything. Not even their own ranks were safe from this manipulation. High-ranking ninja sometimes created false threats, claiming rival groups had cursed them, or that betraying the network would bring disaster. Junior operatives were forced to swear oaths under fake deities, drink concoctions said to bind their souls, or witness staged executions blamed on curses. This wasn't tradition. It was fear management. The ninja leaders didn't trust loyalty. They engineered it. They needed their agents afraid not of enemies, but of disobedience. So they used superstition as a leash. Some agents lived their whole lives believing they were bound to the network by invisible forces. And when they finally broke free, if they ever did, it was often too late. Their minds were already cracked. Because the ninja didn't just weaponize the beliefs of others. They became prisoners of their own illusions. And in those illusions, even the masters of deception sometimes got lost. Chapter 7. They still exist. The ninja vanished. At least that's what the history books say. By the 1600s, the Tokugawa shogunate tightened its grip on Japan. Order was the new law. Espionage became taboo. And those who once thrived in chaos found themselves without a place. The word ninja faded from scrolls. Castles no longer whispered about infiltrations. Enemies no longer died in their sleep. But the truth was more complicated. The ninja didn't disappear. They adapted. The masks came off. The shadows changed shape. But the methods, the tools, the mindset, they slipped into new roles. New uniforms, new systems. From government posts to street performers, former ninja found ways to keep their talents alive. And slowly, without the world noticing, the age of the ninja transformed, not into extinction but evolution. Their legacy didn't burn out, spread quietly, patiently, until it no longer needed the name ninja to exist, because the shadows no longer needed to hide. The scariest truth is not that ninjas existed, but that they still do, not as sword-wielding assassins, but as information ghosts, masters of perception. They live in firewalls, in surveillance networks, in black vans parked 2 blocks away. The techniques once honed in mountain caves are now taught in tech labs and war rooms. The silence of the past has become the noise of the present. And the ninja's greatest weapon, his ability to disappear, has evolved into total deniability. Today, you don't see them because you're not supposed to. That's the new art. And they're better at it than ever. In the end, maybe we never needed to fear the man in the mask. We should have feared the idea behind him. The idea that one person, trained in silence, could shift the fate of kingdoms without lifting a sword. That idea has survived. It's alive in code, in politics, in whispers. It haunts boardrooms and battlefields alike. So when you think the age of the ninja is over, pause, look again, and remember, the deadliest blade is the one you never see. The ninja never vanished. He just became something else. Some found homes in law enforcement. The early police of Edo, Japan had many ranks, many faces. Among them were quiet men who knew how to disappear, who could track fugitives without being seen, who knew how to interrogate without lifting a blade. These weren't samurai, they weren't soldiers. They were something in between, and many were former shinobi. The ninja skills were too valuable to waste. Surveillance, disguise, covert entry. These talents translated naturally to maintaining internal order. They knew how to operate in silence, how to gather intelligence without drawing attention. And while the code of the ninja was never written into police handbooks, its spirit lived on, in unspoken rules, in old techniques whispered from mentor to student. What began as survival slowly became a new system, one less about serving lords and more about controlling the common folk. The ninja had served power before. Now they became part of it. Others went into the world of entertainment. It might sound strange. From assassination to acrobatics, from espionage to stagecraft, but the transition wasn't so jarring. After all, the ninja had always relied on performance, misdirection, timing, disguise. Theater was just another battlefield, one where illusion reigned supreme. In the 17th and 18th centuries, kabuki and bunraku rose to prominence. And hiding within these flamboyant performances were fragments of ninja craft, tricks to vanish from stage, hidden trapdoors, smoke illusions, stories of magic and betrayal and vengeance. The audience thought they were watching fiction, but the techniques were centuries old, passed down from real operatives who now lived behind curtains instead of castle walls. Even today, stagehands in Japanese theater are dressed in black and move like ghosts. It's a relic, a silent nod to a profession long believed extinct. But in truth, the ninja never left. They just learned how to take a bow. Some went abroad. Japan didn't open its doors fully until the mid-19th century. But even before then, some shinobi slipped onto foreign ships. They vanished into distant lands, blended into chaos. And when modern intelligence agencies began to form, first in Europe, then in America, these former shadows found new employers. Not as ninjas, but as spies, advisors. Ghosts who knew how to disappear, how to plant information, how to unravel empires from within. There are whispers that some taught their arts to early espionage circles, that traces of their methods can be found in MI6, in OSS, in the intelligence arms of rising superpowers. No scrolls, no symbols, just instincts. Tricks passed like rumors. Not all were documented, but the echoes are there. In surveillance techniques, in agent training, in the way information is weaponized. The ninja spirit outlived the age of castles. It evolved into something more global, more modern, and far harder to trace. Meanwhile, their philosophy filtered into unexpected places. Martial arts dojos adopted ninja movements without realizing their source. Self-defense manuals mimicked infiltration techniques. Even schools began teaching discipline using models that mirrored shinobi structure. Ranked systems, silent obedience, coded language. What had once been subversion became discipline. What was once outlawed became foundational. In the countryside, some families still passed down quiet rituals, odd exercises, chants, breathing patterns that made no sense to the modern eye. But beneath the surface, they were fragments of shinobi training. Memory preserved in movement, stories told through routine. The ninja had vanished from the records, but they had not vanished from the land. Their footprints lingered, invisible to most, but unmistakable to those who knew where to look. And so their legacy wasn't just preserved, it was embedded. Not as rebellion, but as tradition. Modern ninjas don't wear black. They don't scale rooftops under the moon. But they exist in intelligence firms, in cyber operations, in private security, in elite reconnaissance units. Their methods, though altered by technology, follow the same blueprint. Blend in, collect information, manipulate belief, vanish without trace. From psychological operations to surveillance drones, the principles remain the same. A ninja once used a whisper to topple a lord. Today, it's a leaked document or a viral video. The battlefield has changed, but the strategy hasn't. Influence without detection, action without credit, presence without form. And behind many of the world's unseen manipulations lie fingerprints that, if traced back far enough, echo techniques born in the forests of feudal Japan. But no one calls them ninja now. That word is too loud, too romantic, too obvious. They go by other names: analysts, technicians, contractors. But the mask remains, just invisible. Even pop culture plays its part. Cartoons, comics, films, they've revived the ninja as myth. But in doing so, they've hidden the truth even further. The modern image of the ninja is a caricature. Silent, masked, and armed with stars. Entertaining but false. Yet that falsehood is useful. Keeps the real techniques buried. The real history safe. The real strategies hidden under layers of fantasy. So while people laugh at ninja movies or wear costumes every Halloween, the actual methods continue in silence. That's the final irony. The myth protects the reality, and the shadows applaud quietly from behind the curtain. The more absurd the public image becomes, the more invisible the real techniques remain. Just as planned. There are people today who train in ancient ninjutsu, but even these lineages are debated. Some claim descent from IGA or Koga. Others have invented traditions to sell books or classes. The truth is murky, and perhaps it always was. That's what made the ninja so effective. Their story could never be pinned down. There were no clear rules, no fixed history, just echoes, shadows, traces. The moment you think you understand them, they slip away. Like fog, like memory, and perhaps that's the truest ninja legacy of all. Not in physical skill, but in narrative control. They mastered the art of shaping what people believed, not just in warfare, but in history itself. And so, even now, their real story remains hidden in plain sight. So why does it matter? Because in a world ruled by information, influence, and fear, ninja methods are more relevant than ever. Corporate espionage, online manipulation, social engineering. These are not new inventions. They are simply new masks for old faces. Faces that once crawled through castle moats. That once whispered into sleeping ears. That once vanished behind torches, laughing silently as armies fell to confusion. The ninja was not a warrior. He was a force, an idea, a master of unseen control. And that force never left. It just adapted, it just waited. And now, in the digital age, it thrives.